the real revolution. Any crisis is always new. Therefore, to understand it, the mind must always be fresh, clear, and gentle in its search. I believe that most of us recognize the urgency of an inner revolution, and this is the only way to achieve a radical change in the external, in society. This is the problem that concerns all who have serious intentions: how to bring about radical and fundamental change in society. This is our problem, and this change in the external cannot happen without first having an inner revolution, since society is always static. Any action, any attempt at reform without this inner revolution also becomes static. Thus, without this constant inner revolution, there is no hope, because without it, external action becomes repetitive, habitual. The action in the relationship between you and another, between you and me, is society. And as long as this constant inner revolution does not happen, as long as there is no creative psychological transformation, this society becomes static, without quality of life. It is precisely because this constant inner revolution does not exist that society is becoming increasingly static and crystallized, and therefore constantly fragmenting. What is the relationship between you and misery, between you and confusion? Certainly, this confusion, this misery, did not create itself. You and I created it. It was not a capitalist, socialist, or fascist society, but you and I, through our relationship with one another, who created it. What you are internally has been projected outward into the world. What you are, what you think, what you feel, and what you do in your daily life. This is all projected externally, and it constitutes the world. If we are unhappy, confused, and chaotic inside, then, through projection, all of this becomes the world, society. Because the relationship between you and me, between me and another, is society. Our relationship is confused, egocentric, narrow, and limited. We project this and bring chaos into the world. The world is what you are. So, your problem is the world's problem. Certainly, this is a basic and simple fact in our relationships with many people, but it seems that we always forget this point. We want to produce changes through a system or through a revolution of ideas and values based on a system, forgetting that it is we who create society, who create confusion or order depending on how we live. Thus, it is necessary to start with what is close to us. That is, we must be concerned with our daily existence, with our daily thoughts, actions, and feelings, which are revealed in the way we earn our living and in our relationship with ideas and beliefs. This is our daily existence. The revolution in society must begin with inner transformation, with the psychological transformation of the individual. Now, if there is a social revolution, that is, an action aimed at the external structure of man, no matter how radical this social revolution may be, its true nature is static if there is no inner revolution in the individual and his psychological transformation. Therefore, to create a society that is non-repetitive, non-static, and not subject to disintegration, a society that is always alive, it is essential that there be a revolution in the psychological structure of the individual. Because without inner revolution, without psychological revolution, mere external transformation has very little meaning. That is, society is always becoming crystallized, static, and therefore in constant disintegration. No matter how many laws are enacted, and no matter how wise they may be, society is always in the process of decomposition, because the revolution must happen internally and not merely externally. I think it's important to understand this, rather than jumping straight to external action. If the relationships between individuals, which constitute society, do not result from inner revolution, then the social structure, being static, absorbs the individual and makes them static and repetitive. By perceiving and recognizing the extraordinary meaning of this fact, there is no longer any question of agreeing or disagreeing. The fact is that society is always crystallizing and absorbing the individual, and that constant evolution, creative revolution, can only happen in the individual, not in society, in the external, because society is collapsing, crumbling. What is happening? One of the fundamental reasons is that the individual, who is you, yes, you, has ceased to be creative. Let me explain what I mean. You and I have become imitators. We are copying both internally and externally. Externally, when we learn a technique, when we communicate with each other at the verbal level, there naturally has to be a certain degree of imitation or copying. For example, I copy words to learn to communicate. To become an engineer, I initially need to learn the techniques. I naturally need to use technique to build a bridge. There must be some degree of imitation and copying in external techniques. But when there is internal psychological imitation, in this case, we surely cease to be creative. Our education, our social structure, our so-called religious life, all of these are based on imitation. I'll give an example. I fit into a particular social or religious form. In this case, I have ceased to be a real individual. Psychologically, I have become a mere repeating machine with certain conditioned responses, whether they are Buddhist, Christian, Hindu, German, or English. Our responses are conditioned according to the pattern of society, whether it is Eastern, Western, religious, or materialistic. Thus, one of the fundamental causes of society's disintegration is imitation. And one of the disintegrating agents is the leader, whose true essence is imitation. For us to understand the nature of a disintegrating society, wouldn't it be important to ask whether you and I, whether the individual, can be creative? We can see that when there is imitation, there is disintegration. When there is psychological authority, there is copying. And since our entire mental and psychological constitution is based on authority, for us to become creative, it is necessary to free ourselves from psychological authority. In moments of greater creativity, in those truly happy, vitally engaging moments, there is no sense of repetition, and we don't feel like we are copying. Have you never noticed this? These moments are always new, different, creative, and happy. And so we see that one of the fundamental causes of society's disintegration is imitation, in the worship of psychological authority.